Hi, and welcome back to this free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point, AFR Talk. I am Brian Fisher. Great to have you in the conversation. Update from the Religion of Peace. This comes from Saudi Arabia. There's a Saudi self-help writer that is actually urging men when they go shopping to sexually molest female cashiers so that they will be motivated to stay home to protect their own chastity. So that is the latest from the Religion of Peace. Now, I want to start this segment with a clip. 888-589-8840, number to call. This is Barack Obama again, and I've talked about the fact that he will give lip service to certain things like freedom of the press, but then you look at what he actually does, and it's like Isaiah said, these people serve me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. So he's serving the Constitution with his lips, but his heart is far from the Constitution. His heart is in socialism and Marxism. So here is President Obama pretending to be concerned about freedom of the press. Let's listen.
But a free press is also essential for our democracy. That's who we are. And I'm troubled by the possibility that leak investigations may chill the investigative journalism that holds government accountable.
So he's concerned about chilling investigative journalism. When it's his people, it's Eric Holder that monitored maybe 100 staffers at the Associated Press, that monitored James Rosen, looked into his emails, monitored his parents' phone records, and he's concerned. He doesn't want to have this compromise of investigative journalism. And again, it goes back to this idea that somehow President Obama, his numbers are starting to come down. We talked about that yesterday. The Quinnipiac poll, his numbers are down like 7 points in a month. So it's finally starting to catch up with him. But you'll notice how President Obama always paints himself on the side of the guy that's going to solve this problem. He's going to fix it. He's going to find out who's responsible. Got nothing to do with me. I didn't have anything to do with it. Even though I picked these people, even though they work for me, even though I set the tone, I had nothing to do with it. I'm as innocent and pure as a driven snow, and by golly, I'm going to find out who's responsible, and I'm going to take care of business. We're going to get to them. We're going to punish them. This is unacceptable. This is inexcusable. But why don't we just grab change the order on you, Rob. Grab clip 14, the Andrea Mitchell clip, the next one from Obama. So here's Obama. Hey, I'm concerned. We don't want to interfere with investigative journalism. Andrea Mitchell says, well, look in the mirror.
And finally, Mark, on the subject of these leak investigations, he's going to say he believes in press freedoms, that they need to go after leakers, but not reporters who are doing their jobs. Yet at the same time, this administration has, more than any of its predecessors in recent years, gone after journalists and has not done it in a targeted fashion, has done it in a very broad sweeping way, as we saw with the Associated Press and also with Fox News.
So Andrea Mitchell, I mean, her credentials from a liberal standpoint, impeccable, unchallengeable. This administration, more than any other administration, even more than Richard Nixon, has gone after his enemies in the press. Now, I mentioned Juan Williams is still out there. I mean, he's, for some reason, hacking and flacking for Eric Holder. Remember Tavis Smiley, Cornel West? We got three bad actors. They're all black. I'm embarrassed to admit it. But the people that are subverting our institutions are black men, and I'm totally embarrassed, Tavis Smiley says. Cornel West says totally, they're black guys, totally embarrassed by that. But here's Juan Williams sticking up for Eric Holder, goes toe-to-toe last Sunday. I've had this in the queue since then, toe-to-toe with Britt Hume. Juan Williams trying gamely to defend Eric Holder, and Britt Hume will not put up with it. Let's listen.
In direct response to your question, Chris, Eric Holder did not conduct the probe that led people to somehow come to the madhouse conclusion that James Rosen is somehow a co-conspirator, is somehow to be suspected.
Wait a minute, was that not in the FBI affidavit seeking?
He signed the affidavit as Attorney General of the United States. He did not conduct the probe. So the question is, how do you go at something so that you would come to the conclusion that a working reporter with a long-standing, excellent career in Washington is somehow now involved in espionage? That's the question.
Well, but the problem is it went to Holder, and he okayed it.
He okayed the work of his investigators, and so now, as the Attorney General...
You're saying he's not ultimately responsible as the head man of the Justice Department,
that's why
who
he's being asked
personally
to look
signed
at it.
off on this?
That's what he signed off on. The question is to go back and look at the work of the investigators.
I understand that, but how can he, if he signed off on it, how can he investigate it?
Because now is an opportunity, and he's the exact right person as Attorney General of the United States to see what prosecutors did and how they came to this conclusion.
Well, wasn't he supposed to see all that before he signed off on the affidavit?
You can't see everything. I mean, what he did was to say these are good people and he trusts his people. Now it's time for someone, including him.
I don't know whether,
you don't know whether
he said anything like that or not. What you do know is, and what we all know is, that when that affidavit came to him, rife with assertions that this reporter doing his job was acting in a criminal way, he okayed it.
No, what we know is in the AP case, for example, he recused himself. Hang on a second.
We're running out of time.
He recused himself in that case because he was a potential leaker.
I understand that, but
in this case, in the Rosen case, he had nothing to do with it. All he was doing was signing an affidavit sent to him by his underlings.
All right.
So there's Juan Williams trying to protect Holder, and I think the larger picture here is Juan Williams is really trying to protect President Obama. And by protecting Holder, if they can prop up Holder, that's another layer of insulation for Barack Obama because they're going to have to get through Holder to get to Obama. If Juan Williams throws Holder under the bus, then there's no insulation, there's no shield, there's no protection for Barack Obama. And this is this the Michael Dyson clip? Now here's another hacker and flacker for Eric Holder. This is Michael Eric Dyson. This guy, I believe, is a professor at Georgetown Law or Harvard Law, one or the other. And listen to how far over the top he goes defending Eric Holder. Remember, this is the guy that wouldn't prosecute the Black Panthers because the victims were white. He says, I'm not interested in prosecuting anybody or defending anybody if the victim is white. If the victim is white, they're on their own. I could care less about them. The only victims I'm concerned about are black. If they're black victims, or you can make a case they're black, I will go to the wall to make people pay for that. But if they're white, forget about it. Even though we got the guys on tape intimidating white voters, even though we've got a confession on them intimidating white voters, even when we got a legal finding in court that they're guilty, I'm going to throw that whole thing out. We're not going to do anything about it. That's Eric Holder. He's the guy that's out there snooping into the journalist phone records. And here is Michael Eric Dyson again. Realize the big picture here is to protect Obama. They want to prop up Holder because that's another layer of insulation between the world and Barack the lawless.
I think the Attorney General should step down, too, off of that plateau where he resides in high principle and whip some head. But he shouldn't give up his office. What he should understand is that he is the chief lawgiver of the United States of America, so to speak. He's the Moses of our time, and at least for this administration. So, yes, some people want to put him outside of the arc of of the legal community. That's just ridiculous. He is the bully. He is, in one sense, the whipping boy for so much of the frustration of the right wing. As Joy Reid has brilliantly indicated, their inability to reconcile themselves to the fact that they lost the election means that they will be perennially pursuing a person like an Eric Holder, and since they perceive him to be the most vulnerable, they attack him. But I think what he has to do is to continue to hold fast.
So he refers to him as the Moses of our time, the Moses of our time as the chief lawgiver. And, of course, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, is not a lawgiver. He's the chief prosecutor. He's the chief enforcer, if you will, of the law. He doesn't give the law. It's his job to apply it and to enforce it and to punish those who break it. One last clip before we go to the phones. This is Bob Schieffer. And, again, the question here is the left wants Eric Holder to investigate this business about going after reporters when he is the one, as Brett Hume pointed out, who signed off on the affidavit that made it possible. How can he investigate himself when he authorized the criminal behavior in the first place? And even Bob Schieffer, CBS News, gets the picture.
People often ask me, of all the administrations you've covered, which was the most secretive and manipulative? The Nixon administration retired the trophy, of course. Since then, my answer is whichever administration is currently in power. Information management has become so sophisticated, every administration learns from the previous one. Each finds new ways to control the flow of information. It's reached the point that if I want to interview anyone in the administration on camera, from the lowest level worker to a White House official, I have to go through the White House press office. If their chosen spokesman turns out to have no direct connection to the story of the moment, as was the case when UN Ambassador Susan Rice was sent out to explain the Benghazi episode, then that's what we and you, the taxpayer, get. And it usually isn't much. So I am glad the president has asked the Attorney General to review whether his investigations into leaks is having a chilling effect on journalists. But it shouldn't stop there. The president needs to rethink his entire communications policy, top to bottom. It is hurting his credibility and shortchanging the public. And to head the review, how about someone other than the Attorney General whose department is so deeply involved? That makes no sense to me.
So he says, look, it's just messaging. Obama needs to revisit his communications, but hey, Eric Holder, having Eric Holder investigate himself, bad idea. Here's an audio clip. Speaking of Nixon, Schaefer made the Nixon comparison. Here's an audio soundbite comparing Nixon and Obama.
I have to tell you that is exactly the approach that the Nixon administration took.
I first learned from news reports.
I first learned about it from the same news reports that I think most people learned about this.
The comments I made during this period, the comments made by my press secretary in my behalf, were based on the information provided to us at the time we made those comments.
Keep in mind, by the way, these so-called talking points that were prepared pretty much matched the assessments that I was receiving at that time.
And had we not had that kind of security and that kind of secrecy that allowed for the kind of exchange that is essential,
leaks related to national security can put people at risk.
I must now turn my full attention, and I shall do so once again, to the larger duties of this office.
Others may get distracted by chasing every fleeting issue that passes by, but the middle class will always be my number one focus, period.
In any organization, the man at the top must bear the responsibility. That responsibility, therefore, belongs here, in this office. I accept it.
So that's Jeff Reed, producer. Brilliant montage there, side by side, Nixon and Obama. President Obama, Barack Milhouse Obama. Focal Point After Talk. Back with your calls in 2. Stay with us.